Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to this meeting. It's the 5th of September, obviously the Corporate Parenting Committee. It's now 7 o'clock, so just opening it up, and I hope everyone's had a glorious 3 weeks. I know some of us have been away on holiday, so back to reality, I'm afraid. Just a little warning, this is being live streamed at the minute, so if you don't wish to be seen on screen at a later date, please, now's the opportunity to leave. So with that, can I just now move to the first item, which is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the membership, the Children and Care Council have sent their apologies, and obviously I've made you aware of some officers that have been unable to attend. Yeah, and I believe Councillor Nodjay is on his way as well. I think we've had a message that he's en route, so he shouldn't be too long before he's with us. Second item, minutes. Anybody got anything they'd like to add about the minutes? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I do not consider these minutes as a true and accurate reflection of July's Corporate Parenting Committee. If taken at face value, it seems members didn't engage much, when I would have considered that meeting to have been the most engaging I have seen over the years I have sat on this committee. The first part of the minutes for agenda item 4 seems to say discussions were only around IHAs, when I recall a lot more in-depth discussion on a variety of topics than this. One in particular that is missed out is that I had requested that data representing missing episodes is separated to show distinction between missing from care and missing without authorisation, which unfortunately I know this has not been done for this committee. I'm not prepared to sign these minutes off as a true and accurate record due to the lack of detail of the inquiries made by members at that meeting. I would ask these minutes are redone in time for the next committee, where it can then be decided if they are a true and accurate reflection of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else before I speak? I will say we've had a discussion about this, and obviously having time to have a little think about this, and reading the minutes myself as well. It does seem to be very light with personal information, the contribution from various members, and what was actually discussed. Now I know we did encounter some technical issues on that night, and I do probably understand that that's actually made minute taking more difficult than usual. But I think in the circumstances, and like I say, after thinking about this a little bit, I think it might be prudent to actually go back through the webcast and actually ask the minutes to be redone, just to really try and include some more detail of who said what and when, because as was pointed out, it was quite a lively meeting, and I think it'd be good to have that reflected in the minutes next time. So if we could do that, please, sir. Thank you. Next item, items of urgent business. No, nothing. Declarations of interest. Anybody? Councillor Carter.
I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in something that may or may not come up. There is a Christmas dinner being arranged for care leavers, and a relative is leading on organising this.
Thank you. And just before we get into the meeting itself, I'd just like to sort of raise a couple of little things myself. I did actually go and have a little meeting with Keeley Pullen to discuss virtual schools, which was very, very informative. I know other councillors probably did as well. Went along to one of the community big lunches in West Thurrock and the Active Parks event, and I do believe other councillors may have also gone along to see it. And I think they were really, really super events, actually, very enjoyable. And I believe the Active Parks event I actually found really beneficial. With actually people I actually got to speak to. So just wanted to bring that one up. Thank you. Right, if we can go into the first item, which is item 5, children's social care performance, and I think Dan might be presenting that.
Yes, that's me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So the report sets out the performance for this quarter in children's social care. I think one of the things to note is that where performance has been good, it has remained consistently good throughout. So I won't talk to the whole report, but I'll kind of draw members' attention to key areas. So you'll notice that June was a peak month with an unusually high number of children entering care, leading to our care numbers going up to 308 children. That's since reduced, and today's number is 293 children. And I think that reflects the local authority discharging its duties, really. So In June, we had some sibling groups come into care as a result of safeguarding action, and the sibling groups obviously increased the number of children because by virtue of being a bit larger. And then we also had a number of unaccompanied children entering care as well, which pushed our numbers up for that period. But it does seem to have been a one-off. It was an exceptional month to have that number of children coming into care in that month, and we're back to a more normal level of entry. But having looked at the entries, it is just us doing our jobs, really. As members go through, they'll note that the IHA data is in there, and sadly there has been a dip in performance again. We continue to face capacity issues in respect to the IHAs. If you look at section 5.3, you can see the number of young people entering care at the top of page 22 is set out. And you can see the increase in June, which led to increased demand. Of course, it reflects there's demand from other children placed in our areas as well. Members of the committee might recall that additional capacity was commissioned by the ICB. Unfortunately, the provider who was providing those appointments has now pulled out, and those additional appointments are no longer available to us. The ICB is working on a solution. We did present a more detailed report to the Health and Wellbeing Board last week and escalated our concerns around needing to improve this area of performance. And one of the actions from that committee was for there to be a joint needs assessment, particularly around this area, and looking at the services for unaccompanied children across the South Essex area entering care, so that there could be appropriate health assessments timely for all children entering care. So that's something that will be picked up at that committee in the future. I did just want to draw members' attention also to children who go missing. So during Q1, there were 83 missing episodes, which represented 28 individual children. Many of the children were missing for a few hours and had stayed out later than the agreed return time. Over 90% of the children were staying with friends or family, and others have refused to say where they've been or who with. Over 80% of the children that went missing were aged 16 or 17 years old, with the majority being male. The youngest children were aged 13 years, and there were 2 children that went missing of that age. With one aged 14 and 2 aged 15, 12 children went missing for over 24 hours, but one were returned back without concern. One child was missing for over 72 hours. I think it's worth just highlighting that this is an area that we do take very seriously. We continue to treat children as missing, even if they may be away without leave, for want of a better phrase. So we want to make sure that children are safe and we know where they are and that we've assessed where they're going if they're not at the placement. We're careful with carers and with those in residential and supported accommodation to ensure that they're in contact with children who might be just returning late because they've missed a train or they've stayed on longer than perhaps they should have past their curfew. So there's a high level of communication. I think one of the things we'd like to do is make sure that this is presented as a report at the next committee, if that's agreeable, that will detail some of this information and go in depth to hopefully answer some of members' questions and give a strong response back so that the position regarding missing looked after children can be understood. The other thing I wanted to pick up, which was mentioned last time, if we go to 6.2, please. In your packs, you'll see there were some queries last time about the types of placement of children in the distance that they are placed from home. So there's a rather clunky graph, and I'm sorry if that wasn't as easy to read as it could have been, but trying to fit a lot of information in a fairly small box, I'm afraid, which sets out where children are placed and the kind of numbers that you can see in different placements at the end of Q1. So you can see we have a number of 53 children in semi-independent accommodation, we have 20 children in children's homes, some children living with their parents, and then you can see the majority of children are in foster placements, either with a relative or friend, or with a mainstream foster carer or someone who's duly approved as an adopter or foster carer. So hopefully that gives members of the committee the information they were looking for last time and gives some idea of the scope of placements that we have. At the end of June 2023, 72% of children looked after were placed within 20 miles or less of their home, which represents 223 out of the 308 children. So that's an area that we continue to work on. We continue to try and build capacity for local placements and to bring children closer to home We know that by the end of the next quarter, some of the children who are placed further away will be back in area or will be turning 18, meaning that they will be moving back into the area in a different way. Hopefully that sets out the key areas here in the report. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Dan. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Lodger.
Thank you very much. Is that okay? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report, and apologies for coming in late. In your opening speech, you did talk about increased number of children coming into care in June. Is there any particular reason why that is happening?
So part of it was a group of unaccompanied children. When unaccompanied minors arrive in Thurrock, they arrive unexpectedly, and it just depends on what their route into the country has been. So and in June we had 8 arrivals in one day, and that just pushed our numbers up significantly because they'd all been found in a lorry on that particular day. The other children came into care in June were part of sibling groups, so we had 2 sibling groups of 4 or 5, and that can push our numbers up. So if you think about it in terms of family rather than individual children, June wasn't that exceptional, but if you break it down into individual children, and that's what we measure in this report, the number was higher. I did look at all the entries into care that month. I do every month and see roughly what the reasons are, and I was confident for all of those children that the local authority was acting to safeguard them and protect them, either because they had no parent and arrived in the country, or because we had concerns about the well-being of those children that were significant.
That it wasn't is something that wasn't anticipated. Does that have any impact in the way you actually manage the whole care system?
So it probably leaves me with a few grey hairs, a busy month, and but what we also have is we have our own foster carers, our colleagues sitting down there, who are brilliant at stepping forward in an urgent situation to help. We have good links with commissioned services in the area to support particularly unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And so we know what their capacity is most days, and we send weekly updates to our out-of-hours service so that if there is a sudden arrival of children out of hours, they are aware of where they can make placements. And so we do our best. We have a duty to ensure we have sufficient placements, and we work really hard to do that. But it is a lot of goodwill and a lot of hard work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the feedback.
Councillor Carter.
And thank you for your report, Dan, and thank you, Chair. I note that 3 of Thurrock's unaccompanied asylum-seeking children are awaiting transfer to another authority. This will be a very troubling time for children. I was wondering, how long does the process take to complete a transfer? Do we have any control over this? And what do we do to make this process as comfortable as possible for the looked-after child who are likely to have gone through a traumatic time?
Thank you. I'll let Luke come in, as he's the service manager for that area and is quite expert.
So yes, it is a difficult time for young people who are due to transfer, and what we know is that if that process is delayed, it can become more difficult. The timescales kind of set out as part of the National Transfer Scheme are within 10 days, and under the National Transfer Scheme, it is difficult to escalate when those timescales aren't met. So other authorities will be identified to take children, and that process is managed by the Home Office. In this circumstance, what we were able to do is liaise directly with colleagues in Essex local authorities who we have really well-established relationships with. And although there's a rota on the National Transfer Scheme, although it wasn't the turn of Essex local authorities to take those, or sorry, Eastern Region local authorities to take transfers, we were able to kind of make those arrangements. And what that does is mean that we're able to kind of transfer children much more smoothly, much shorter time scales, and kind of do that at the earliest possible opportunity. It can be difficult if there are authorities further afield to escalate those concerns. Previously, there would have been a conversation at director level, for example, if there were delays, and that's difficult now because those conversations go through the Home Office. In our experience, there's been minimal number of transfers because of two things. COVID has obviously minimised the number of young people coming in for a long period of time, and we've also had a raise in the national quota. That means that children who have come into Thurrock have stayed in Thurrock because we've been under the quota. So these three children that transferred out are the first transfers out we've had in a long time. As I said, we've kind of used our relationships in the Eastern region to make sure those transfers happen smoothly. So in that sense, these young people have had a good experience in terms of that transfer as far as is possible.
Okay, finished? Are you okay? Do you want any other questions? Oh, okay. Anybody else? Anybody else like Manical? No? Fine. Okay.
So can we ensure that these graphs and data-heavy agendas are sent to members in colour to better distinguish differences in data? I've received mine in black and white. I don't know about other members. You know, it's sometimes hard to distinguish.
Yes, that's fine. I send them on in colour, so I'm not really sure where they lose their colour. So yeah, I'll check.
Yeah, Councillor Gardner.
In 5.3, we are given an update on children's looked after initial health assessments. As members may recall, at July's meeting, I said we should take this progress on the IHAs with a pinch of salt, as too many times it has picked up only to fall off again after members are asked. To note improvements within the recommendations of a report. Sadly, this has been the case again, and numbers of IHAs completed in time has dropped by close to 30%. I note the work of our social workers improving referrals on time consistently up to the present. However, I remain annoyed that NILFT, who have received funds to improve the amount completed on time, to continue to not provide consistent improvement to an area that has been under intense scrutiny.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'll just throw in a couple of quick sentences. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's very disappointing, actually. And I do remember that previous meeting and these comments were made that we didn't want it to slip back, and it's a real big shame that that's happened. So hopefully
I don't know if you want me to.
Yeah, of course.
So I think, I think we all would like to see that number continuing in a positive way, and it's frustrating to see it dip. So it's a shared frustration. I think one of the things to be clear about is the additional appointments were commissioned by the Integrated Care Board, the ICB, to cover the NELFT area, but NELFT itself wasn't given the extra money. It's commissioned directly to the provider. The provider notified the ICB that they didn't want to continue to provide, so 100 appointments were commissioned, and they pulled out of the contract before those 100 were provided. So there was a dip in capacity, and that wasn't something that NELFT itself could control. What we have done is we've had children who are placed outside the NELFT area, so there are looked after children perhaps placed in other areas, and there are capacity issues there. And again, we've escalated from ICB to ICB when that happens, but unfortunately it doesn't create extra capacity at the other end, so it does mean that there is delay. I think all we can do is keep pushing this. I think it was a helpful suggestion from the Head of Service for Public Health and Wellbeing to look at a joint needs assessment across the South Essex area to see if they can improve it. But I think it is going to remain challenging, sadly.
Thank you, Chair. Just to offer a little bit of support, as one of my outside bodies, I'm appointed to the Council of Governors for MSC and FHT, which the ICB sits within. So I commend the efforts that are going to be made, and I welcome the joint up approach, because I think if you involve Essex, Southend and Thurrock and look at it as an Essex-wide problem, I think you've got more oomph, haven't you? You've got more presence. But I'm just asking if there's a bottleneck, or if you come across, I think Health Watch have described it as a lot of silence from directors as regards the ICB. If you're experiencing that, I am a mechanism through the Council of Governors that governors can put questions to the board as well, and we can come at it as a different direction. So I'm just offering that as an extra tool in your toolbox if it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take you up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Harstein.
Lovely, thank you. Just carrying on with the IHAs, if that's okay, please, just on page 21. I'm just looking initially at when the referrals for initial health assessments made within 5 working days. Obviously, you know, we're looking at the idea of parents having given permission. Sorry, it's page 21. Sorry. What are the other reasons why the deadline, that 5-day deadline, might not have been met?
So sometimes it is, unfortunately, not getting the form completed exactly correctly. So we complete the form, we send it off, and then something's picked up, and that can be an issue. The other thing can be that where children go into emergency placements, they might be for a very short period of time. So if a child's police protected, we might need to find a placement that can support them immediately because that's their need. But they're not able to stay there. So sometimes the placement changes even within the first 5 days, and therefore the form has to be resubmitted. So sometimes a change of placement, even if we are, you know, well on track to deliver, had the placement not changed, it almost needs recompleting then. So they're the 2 most significant reasons. We are looking to amend our internal form when a child comes into care under Section 20 with voluntary accommodation, so that when you sign once, you sign to cover both the entry into care and the health stuff, and that's something that we'll be picking up with our health partners once we've got governance completed on our side. Sorry, I was running out of breath.
Thank you. And just sort of following up from that, and I don't know whether it's going to be practical, whether it's sort of incumbent. Is there any chance that we can have a breakdown of the reasons within the referrals on time and the IHAs taking place on time? Do you think it's practical for us to be provided with a breakdown on the reasons why they weren't made on time, or is that going to be
that's
sort of
something we can do.
categorised?
That's something we can do.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I think most of the points I was going to ask actually have been covered and covered well. These items always bring up much discussion, and I'm glad we got some more feedback coming back to us at a later meeting. So thank you very much for that, Dan. Much appreciated. Anybody else got anything else to say? Ask. Councillor Polly.
It's a comment rather than a question. Listening to Dan and hearing that the services that were commissioned, that provider had withdrawn from providing that service, we're also aware within my ward and Aveley ward about L&D withdrawing that service as well. I don't know whether I've got a nervousness about why these organisations are withdrawing services, and if we're looking at a national problem, if there's a reason why those care providers might withdraw services.
I think that's probably a question for health colleagues who weren't able to make it here today. In terms of the appointments, it wasn't a decision that was related to any particular national concern. It was a local issue with that provider, but probably best that health colleagues are able to comment on that, and perhaps they can provide something in writing after the meeting today.
Yeah, I think that'd be very beneficial, actually, because this is not obviously one of my strongest points, and I need to sort of have a bit of a deep dive and learn a little bit more about this. So, yes, so that's yes, the more we can sort of bring to the table, and that'd be good. Okay, so if no one else has got anything else to add, if I can just move to the recommendations on page 12, and that's 1.1 and 1.2. Is everybody in agreement with those? Page 12. Yeah, all agreed?
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now move to the next item, which is the joint housing protocol for care leavers. And I believe that might be down again as well.
Yeah, it's me again. I'm afraid you've got me a few times this evening.
Yeah,
So this report sets out the joint protocol for between housing and care leavers. We've got some housing colleagues join us tonight. So we've got Chris over there and Evelina, who've contributed to this. So thank you to them. Every local authority is required to have a joint housing protocol. It sets out in the legal imps, and what the protocol sets out is how we will support young people leaving care to access housing, and what we will do whilst they're in housing to ensure that works. The objective, it's an annual document that was updated yearly, so those of you who were here last year might recall this coming then. So the key points of update from last year is to ensure a smoother application journey for care experienced young people, to ensure care leavers at risk of arrears are supported, and we reduce risk of eviction. That's a piece of work that's very much ongoing at the moment. To ensure that if a young person does become vulnerable to homelessness, that we have clear arrangements in place, and I've been grateful to adult colleagues for their support there. And to ensure that matters raised by officers are resolved quickly. We have monthly meetings with housing colleagues at senior level and from all aspects of the service, and that's been really useful in unblocking little things or just moving things forward, and we have seen some success, I think, with the number of young people who are successfully bidding. So at the end of June 2023, there were 29 young people bidding for a property, and we've managed to support 22 care experienced young people to a council tenancy. I think one of the things that we'd like to take forward and develop in the next year is around making sure that we have enough sufficiency to meet that need, but also to look at all the housing options for care leavers and make sure that where they are in tenancies that we're supporting them so they don't get into arrears at a very early point. So as I say, that's a focus of our work at the moment. I'm happy to take any questions.
Hi, I have a question regarding care leavers that maybe can't necessarily afford to have a property of their own. Forgive me, this is an ignorant question, but if you're in a position, like as a lot of young people are, where past the age of maybe 18 or like 21, you still can't afford like a property of your own, even if it is like council. For them, is that a situation where they stay put, or could I get some like clarity as to like what happens if you're a young person, maybe you're not in work, you can't even afford to have your own like council property? Do you have an option to stay with your foster parents, or like what kind of happens then? Thank you.
So, sure. So later on in the agenda today, we'll talk about staying put, and absolutely young people who are turning 18 and in those first few years, if they become an adult, can stay with their foster carer if they're in a foster placement just before they turn 18. So there are other types of placements that can't offer that continuity. We do have a programme called Head Start Housing that has moved over to housing colleagues now, and that provides I suppose HMO. So something between HMO and university halls for someone who's outside of it would probably be a good explanation. So you live together with perhaps people you don't necessarily know initially, but you live together in shared accommodation, and there's additional support from housing colleagues and from specialist staff in there to help them maintain and manage the property, and then also they have the support from the aftercare team around the other bits, benefits, looking at getting young people into work. So we have the Head Start programme. Where we are supporting young people, we're always mindful of their benefit entitlements, particularly things like housing benefit, and we are quite experienced as a council in finding properties or arrangements that can be funded through housing benefit to make sure that people can afford to have some stable accommodation around them. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I would just add from a housing perspective that obviously any time we get a referral through from Children's Services, and when we're discussing all of this, one of the first things that we look at is whether that person is ready for it. And part of that readiness is affordability, as it would be for any homeless person or anyone else that we rehouse. In the vast majority of cases, if we're not talking about affordable rents, if we're talking about social rents, they ought to be affordable given the levies on housing benefit and the LHA for care leavers. But where it isn't, obviously, we work very closely with Children's Services to make sure that they're in the right place until they can be in a better place.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Polly.
Thank you, Chair. And picking up on Councillor Memoir's point there, with financial worries and being a care leaver, I'm just a little bit concerned about safeguarding issues around cuckooing. How vulnerable are these young people with exploitation of other people that might take advantage of their accommodation. Is this something that we've known to be a problem in Thurrock, or are we are we reasonably confident that there's good governance in place to protect people?
I think it is an issue that we've been aware of in a small number of cases. I think PAs have really good relationships with young people for a start, so it's we are able to become aware of those situations. If we have a case where we are concerned around exploitation, criminal exploitation, including cookery and all those kind of features, we very quickly would be pulling together the professional network, including the police, including the community safety team, including housing colleagues, and would be making sure that there's a multi-agency plan in place to deal with that. So that might include intelligence sharing with the police. It might include approaching housing colleagues for things like managed moves if we feel that there's a level of risk. It might include working with the community safety team to put in plans place for police presence in that area, to look at coordinated use of CCTV. There's lots of strategies that we use to kind of safeguard young people in the community, disrupt that kind of criminal activity, and ultimately support young people to move if they have to move. But in our experience, that's quite rare.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it actually just sort of brings me on to just one thing I was going to ask a bit later. It's sort of quite closely related. It's on page 31. And it's saying about the young people, they're getting ready to move on, and it's the alternative residential provisions. And one of them was university, and it kind of sort of jumped out at me, because obviously there would be universities with their own accommodation, but then there would be other accommodation in the town where the university is. I mean, how do we actually supervise and safeguard these people that are in these areas that are really sort of can be hundreds of miles away? I mean, how does that actually work?
I mean, it comes down to similar kind of features to what I've discussed, really. Obviously, we have statutory duties to keep in touch with young people, to visit them directly. We have PAs who are kind of able to build good relationships with young people. They will also be kind of in touch with college, the pastoral support in the college or the university if required. So it's really a similar kind of strategy, really, of knowing our young people, building those relationships and having the trust to have open and honest conversations with them, and kind of working with the professional network to kind of have a coordinated response. Whether they live down the road or whether they live outside of Thurrock, in a sense, it doesn't make any difference to us. Like, we go through those same procedures, and we have to build those relationships and kind of have a grip on that network and understand what's going on for the young person.
Okay, yeah, because it's just to reassure us that there is that sort of safety net for these people when they can be sort of hundreds of miles away from home, and the system does work and does provide for them should the need be there. So, Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. We always mention care leavers in suitable accommodations as a key benchmarking figure. What defines suitable, and does quality at all come into this? I remember as a care leaver myself, I was sent to, my accommodation was a bed set at the top of a Chapel high rise. There wasn't a problem with mould at that time, but since I've become a councillor for that area, one of my most the things I get in touch with most about is mould in Chapel high rises. I know the work is going on of the ground source heat pumps to rectify this issue, and I wish that all the best. But my question is, where does quality come into suitable housing?
So I think just in terms of housing generally, so young people will have their own tendencies, their own things. So unlike before 18, when we could say, look, we don't think this is great, so we're going to move you from here to here because it's a placement, we have to be mindful it's their tendency and their choice. But if we do have concerns, or a young person's raising concerns, we have escalation routes to the housing service if it's a council property to say, this is a concern, and they have some action protocols, particularly in relation to mould. And then the PA would support and advocate for young people there. Suitable accommodation can cover a whole range of things, But what we are doing, is, as I think Luke expressed, is going out and visiting young people. We're seeing them in their accommodation where they'll agree to that. And if there are concerns, then we can have a conversation directly with them. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add around suitability.
I guess the one thing I would add is we do have a monthly meeting with housing colleagues, and that is to kind of look at the joint approach around housing and supporting care leavers in accommodation generally. That's a really good forum if we do pick up on issues around quality or issues that are experienced by care leavers. We can kind of feed into that forum and kind of have those discussions at quite high levels, and kind of understand what's going on strategically and kind of make decisions in that way, which is really helpful, I think, and sort of speaks to the close joint working that we have with the housing team in Thurrock.
If I might just add from a housing perspective, it is a really good question, because largely in housing, suitability is quite a statutory concept and doesn't really include quality. It's more about repair. But certainly the idea of having placed Head Start under more of a housing management means that now there are more experienced tenancy management people involved in that part of the process. So they'll be more experienced at handling sort of disrepair and quality issues that you're talking about at an earlier stage. And then when they move into the council properties, they maintain the same tenancy management. So they're getting that consistency of approach throughout. I know that there have been issues, obviously, around like the Chadwell blocks, like you say, with mould and those kinds of things. These are certainly things we're addressing. We've got the new damp policy coming through with the way we're going to work with all of those things. And certainly, we wouldn't want to place any young person, or in fact anyone else, into a property that we didn't think was healthy for them.
And just more generally around the stock and sort of Chadwell High Rise in particular, see anything to do with the stock, we have got the sort of repair service that can pick it up. We are actually taking damp and mould report specifically to the Housing Government Scrutiny end of this month, so that we can show the sort of the work and how we addressing in particular the recommendation in the Housing Ombudsman report around the spotlight on damp and mould. For Chadwell Towers in particular, so the heating installation programme has now concluded, and we will now we are now delivering the rest of the works to really improve the overall living conditions in those properties. So we're just scoping replacement of the windows, upgrades to the ventilation system. We've added already insulation into the main walls where you see the brick facades, but those kind of panels below the windows will also be added. We'll have the insulated added to them from the external. So after we've done with those blocks, which will be probably another 18 to 24 months from now, the overall thermal sort of efficiency and the performance of those properties should be vastly improved, and residents should really, across the stock, feel that for themselves. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anybody else? Oh, Janet.
Just a quick one. So obviously for us, what we want is for our care leavers to be living in properties that are safe. So we try to make sure that when they're placed, when they're provided with a property, that it's not in an area where they have experienced something where they might be unsafe. But also we do have some criteria in terms of how we measure whether their housing is suitable, and so we have clear criteria about what isn't suitable. So bed and breakfast is not acceptable, so we don't have any of our care leavers in bed and breakfast. In hotels, if you're in custody, that's considered to be unsuitable. Sofa surfing, if we don't know where young people are living, then we would say that's unsuitable because we don't know that they're safe and that they're in an appropriate environment. So we do try and make sure we look at all of those areas.
Okay, thank you. You done it? Anybody else like to make a contribution? No, that's fine. Right, okay, well, I've got nothing else to add. Thank you very much, Dan, for that. That's most helpful. So if we can now move to the recommendations, I think on page 29, and that is 1.1 and 1.2. Everybody okay with that? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right, moving on to the next report, which is the aftercare service report, and I believe that's Matt. Oh, very, very sorry. Thank you.
No worries. So my report, again, I'll try and pick out some of the key issues. The initial part of the report goes through the statutory duty and the kind of eligibility categories of young people that we work with in the aftercare service. Looking at the issues, the first thing that's highlighted in the report is the increased demand on the service currently. We have seen a gradual increase in demand, and it's likely that there will be a continued increase in demand, predominantly through three kind of avenues, really. An increase in the US population, although, as I mentioned earlier, we're now at our agreed quota for US young people, so we may have new arrivals into Thurrock, but the idea would be that they would transfer out to other local authorities at this stage. We've had increased numbers of adolescents coming into the care system, which obviously increases the age of the CLA population overall. And we've had increased numbers of young people needing additional support post the age of 21. And you'll see a number of tables there on the following page that kind of sets out some of those figures. In response to the increase in demand, we've seen plans for a new structure within the aftercare service, and that's been a gradual process which we hope to be finalised by the end of September. That new structure will provide more resource in aftercare, so there'll be two new full-time personal advisor posts. There will be an additional team manager post, and alongside those positions there will be a qualified social work senior practitioner in the team and a PA with a housing specialism to particularly work on issues around accommodation and close working with Head Start Housing and our housing colleagues. So at the end of the first quarter there were 383 young people eligible for support from the aftercare service. One of the issues we have currently is around support for care leavers over 21. So relatively recently there was a change which meant that care leavers could receive support up until the age of 25 should they want that, and should that be agreeable to them. So we do have a cohort of cases of care leavers between the age of 21 and 25. One of the things we're doing is really reviewing those cases, particularly in the context of having kind of additional management oversight at the moment. So we're able to kind of go through those and have detailed discussions about what actually is the need of these young people, what's the value of a continued service from aftercare, and kind of having those discussions about what should be our role. So the message to care leavers is absolutely aftercare services open to you and available to you up until the age of 25. It might be, though, that the case doesn't need to be open. You might have many of our care leavers are very successful. They have good solid accommodation, they have good jobs, they have good networks around them, and there's no specific piece of work that's currently happening to support them. And therefore, they might feel comfortable to kind of go on without necessarily the PA kind of visiting them every 8 weeks or 12 weeks for over 21s. But what we know is that might change. So, 8 weeks down the road, something might happen. There might be a specific reason they require support. And the message to them is any time you can phone your PA, you can contact the aftercare team, you can come to us with an issue and we will evaluate that and look at what support we can put in place. One of the things that we're doing currently, which I'll talk about a bit later on in the report, is updating the local offer. And one of the things we want to be really clear with our care leavers about is, look, even post 25, PAs are available to you if you've got an issue, if you're not sure, what to do, if you want someone to talk to, you can contact the PA and they will have a conversation with you. They might not be chasing you, they might not be knocking on your door every 12 weeks for a visit and things like that, but we will always be here to advise and to guide and to signpost for support, etc. So moving on, one of the other features is an external review that we've had recently So this was carried out by experienced external reviewers who were previous Ofsted inspectors and were looking at the kind of good practice and helping us to understand what are areas of strength in terms of support for care leavers and what are areas where we need to kind of focus on and look at development. So the feedback from that was really helpful. They identified that a lot of the fundamentals around good practice and good support for young people are in place. They saw that young people were seen regularly, they were spoken to, that plans are in place for young people, that managers have robust systems to monitor issues and make sure things are in place in a timely way, completion of pathway plans, for example, and that they could see improvements in those systems that were already there. They heard from the young people that they really value their relationships with their PAs. They could see that workers were tenacious about seeing young people and kind of going out and making sure they have contact with young people. They could see that there was quality support around housing and those kind of practical issues for young people. Obviously, as with any review, they also highlighted some areas for development, and they talked about holistic and co-produced pathway plans and making it clear in terms of our system and our recordings what the young person's input into the production of pathway plans is. They talked about recording really strongly the young person's voice and the effect of the young person's voice. They talked about improving the understanding of young people between 16 and 17 about what is the role of the PA during that time, given that they also have an allocated social worker and how do those two roles interact. They talked about continuing to look at transition planning, to making sure that transition planning is in place at the earliest possible level and there's good engagement with adult services. They talked about the development of the mental health, emotional health offer for young people in Thurrock on a general level, and talked about the promotion of the local offer so that it's clear, young people kind of see it, they understand it, they recognise it, etc. So the recommendations from that review have been incorporated into the service development plan, which will be overseen at an aftercare board, which will be chaired by Janet as the Assistant Director, to make sure that those recommendations are taken on board and driven forward to kind of look at those areas of development and ensure there's improvement. So if we look at the priorities over the next 12 months, one of the things is around consultation with young people. We have an annual schedule of events that's in place to make sure that we get good face-to-face time with young people, that they're invited to events, and that opens up opportunities to do consultation with them on a number of issues. Most recently, some feedback on the proposals we have for an improved local offer for young people. We are also exploring the idea of a youth hub, so a building which is separate from the usual council buildings, which will be a place where young people can come, can meet with their PA, can hang out, can get advice and guidance, and also act as a kind of home from home for our care leavers. The next area of focus is around the personal advisor's input from the age of 16 to 18. The role of the PA during that period is around getting to know the young person, to start to build that relationship, to help the young person to understand what the issues might be as they approach 18 in adulthood, and to help them understand what the offer is from the aftercare service at that point. It's also about using the expertise of the PAs who pick up those cases at 18 and work with those young people to feed into the planning at an earlier stage, to help social workers at 16, 17, 18 understand not just what the issues now for this young person, but what the issues that we need to start working on now that will help them to have a smooth transition and good support at 18 and beyond. So as part of that, PAs attend review meetings for children who are looked after. Their expertise is able to be fed into that, and we're starting to also invite PAs and team managers from the aftercare service into casework supervision. So casework supervision will take place between the children looked after social worker and their team manager. We want the PAs and the aftercare managers to be part of that discussion from the age of 16 to really kind of embed their thinking into that early planning. One of the other things that we've been doing is for the independent reviewing officers to chair review meetings post-18 as well, to have that independent oversight at that really crucial time as they kind of move into adulthood. One of the other areas for focus is accommodation. We've talked a lot about accommodation, so I won't dwell on that too much, but I'm open to questions should there be any arising. And we're also kind of looking at pathway planning. Obviously, the pathway plan is the key document for us. It really pulls together all of the thinking, the analysis of the social worker and the PA, and sets out what's the goals, what's the priorities for the young person, how can we really champion them and advocate for them to ensure that everything's in place to make sure that they kind of are able to achieve their potential. So there's a new format around the pathway plan that was introduced some time ago, is now live on the system. That really seeks to bring out the voice of the young person within pathway planning, and kind of bring their voice to the fore. It also seeks to reduce some duplication on the part of PAs, to reduce their caseload. So one of the things that we've added relatively recently is some adjustments to the housing section of the pathway plan, so that when our PAs are going to housing to make applications for social housing, they don't have to now fill out another form that kind of repeats a lot of the information they've already got in our system. They can use that pathway plan document and provide that to housing colleagues, and it kind of gives them all the information that they need to kind of make decisions around housing applications. The other thing that we're trying to do in the pathway plan is really embed the signs of safety practice, which is our model of practice in Thurrock, and there are kind of scaling questions and questions within the new format that really focuses on what are the strengths of the care leaver and that network, and kind of where are the areas for development. So moving on, the next area is around the local offer. Again, as I've mentioned, that's something that we're in the process of kind of reviewing at the moment and developing. We had a recent barbecue event with care leavers where we took some of our proposals for the local offer and kind of went to them to kind of find out which bits they liked, which bits they didn't like, what, are there any gaps in terms of what they would like us to offer that we're not currently offering. Some very positive feedback from young people around that. Particularly they like the ideas we have around supporting them with driving lessons, around some of our ideas about supporting them around birthdays. They were also really positive about support for them to attend interviews and things like, you go to your first interview, some help to kind of get a suit and be able to present yourself and things like that. They're also really positive about the ideas around support for books and equipment for those young people who are in college and university. So we've had some good feedback there. Moving on to education, we definitely have seen the impact on our EAT figures in terms of COVID. And what we're seeing is a gradual picture of improvement in terms of that stuff. We have more young people who are becoming EAT, but we are still slightly below our statistical neighbours in terms of that stuff, and there's definitely more work to be done in terms of improvement. We have regular meetings with the Inspire Youth Hub to look at care leavers who aren't in education or employment. We have PAs attending that meeting to give a really good picture of who this young person is, what their interests are, what motivates them, and we try to match the young person's interests and motivational things with employment opportunities provided by or identified by Inspire. We also have a pilot project ongoing with a small group of young people where there's some intensive kind of support. Let's really kind of try and get behind them, have some really intensive support from the children's services in terms of kind of giving them the confidence to go out there and explore employment, and really challenging our Inspire colleagues to find those opportunities that's going to kind of motivate them to kind of engage and kind of step into what can be quite an anxious kind of new experience for some care leavers. So just quickly on performance, just a couple of comments there around performance in terms of pathway plans, which have been consistently good for a sustained period. They've been within the last year, or between June 22 and June 23, 92% of pathway plans have been completed on time for care leavers, and that's a trend that continues. And in terms of staying in touch with our care leavers, we're in touch with 95% of our care leavers, which is really pleasing to see. If there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Luke. That was, and apologies for that earlier on. I don't know who I was thinking of. But yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic report. Very extensive, very detailed, absolutely great. And it's full of really sort of heartwarming items in there, isn't it, really? I mean, and you can see really the passion that comes through from yourself and obviously the team. So yeah, no, it's a great read. It's absolutely full, and you've done it justice. So thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Cecil, first, please.
Yes. How many care leavers does each PA normally work with?
So at the moment, the caseloads for PAs is higher than we would like. And it's not unusual for them to have between 25 and 28 maybe care leavers at the moment. As I've said, there are some changes to the structure, and there are additional PA roles coming into the service. So at the moment there are 3 permanent PA roles that are in pre-employment. So we've interviewed those PAs, we've offered those posts, we're waiting for references to come back and things like that. When those 3 new posts come online, the caseload for PAs is likely to be more around 24, 25 cases, which is comparable to other local authorities, and a reasonable caseload.
Just another question. Have you been able to accept any care leavers at 25 as a PA? Are you looking to develop from your care leavers jobs like the PA?
So we do have care leavers employed in Thurrock as PAs at the moment.
Oh, good. Thank you.
No worries. And absolutely, we're looking for those opportunities, whether it be a PA or any role in the council. We absolutely would champion care leavers to kind of take on those roles. And yeah, we've had care leavers in those roles before, and we do currently as well. Yeah.
I've got a couple of people to bring in, but as I said, I've got a couple of little notes here because it was quite interesting actually reading it for the first time. There's actually 14 full-time staff. It's quite a bit. And I was going to ask actually, do you have trouble recruiting the PAs? And are there any sort of special levels of education that need to be attained to actually to fill these posts?
So there's no particular qualifications that are required. Obviously, the skill set of a PA is massively diverse, as you can imagine, and we're always looking to bring something into the team that we don't already have. So recently we employed a PA who's got a wealth of experience working in DWP and benefits and things like that, and so although they might not be the most experienced working with this cohort of young people, they've got something that they can offer, and that kind of really adds to what we can offer to our care leavers, and that's something they can share with the rest of the team and kind of develop that experience. As I said, we have one PA post that's a specialist in kind of housing, and previously was employed in the Head Start housing service. So we wanted to kind of bring them into the service to really get the most of that expertise. So we do tend to get lots of applications for PA posts when we go out to that post. Because of the type of role it is, they can vary in quality, I think it's fair to say. But as I said, we've relatively recently been out to interview, and we've got 3 posts kind of on the way in. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. It's interesting. Thank you. Can I have? Oh, it's Councillor Polly next. Thank you.
Sorry, guys. Thank you for the report. And on that subject of the PAs and bringing different skills and knowledge into the gene pool, really, is something I'm interested in. Is as you mentioned, driving lessons is the mobility car scheme for neurodiverse for under 25. So I think there's some scope there that I don't know if that's been looked at for some of our younger people to help with their independence. And I'm not going to ask for this for tonight, but just something perhaps if we could have it emailed out after the meeting, Chair. At 9.2 on page 67, there's a small graph. We've talked about EATS, 17 to 18-year-olds, and then EATS again at 19 to 21. At 9.5, there's a two-line paragraph about NEETs. So my first question is, 9.2, I've got a percentage, but that doesn't tell me how many actual people. So we've got 64.7% of each age 17 to 18 and 19% of, 56.6% of 19 to 21-year-olds. But I don't know what the total number of those EATs are and what that is that percentage is in relation to that. And equally for the NEETs as well, we seem to have sidelined them, and I think unfortunately that's what happens with NEETs quite a bit. I think that they needed a bigger profile up there with the EATs. That's just a personal observation. Along with Councillor Cecil's point, I picked up on what you said earlier, that although that we've got all these care leavers that are eligible for PAs and support, that then don't always take it up. So although a PA might be assigned 25 young people, that they might not be active caseloads. They could be, but they might not all be active. But my concern was more around the retention of staff. We've had very good comments and good peer reviews, and I certainly know and have applauded the fact that social workers have come to work in Thurrock because of the service that the guys and girls provide here. But it's that continuity, isn't it? In any walk of life, whether it's your own GP, whether it's your dentist, whether it's we want that continuity of care, don't we? We want staff retention, recruiting new PAs is good, but do those as looked after children progress from the 17 to 18 age bracket or the 19 to 21, does that mean they get a different PA? Do they stay with the same PA? Just wondering.
Just to kind of clarify, we want continuity for our young people as well. So we're doing quite a lot around recruitment and retention. As Luke said, we get quite a high number of applicants for PAs. So we're really trying our hardest to make sure that we get the right candidates, people who want to do the job, but also want to stay. And we are trying to make sure that young people get the message that their case is always open. So rather than saying, you're 21 now, can we close it? What we're saying to young people is, you have a right to a service up to the age of 25. We'd like you to stay involved with us. We can't force young people to be involved with us post 21, but we try our best to keep in contact with them and maintain a relationship. So we're moving towards having a system whereby young people can. So if they're 23 and they decide, I've just finished university, I've got a job, I'm getting on with my life, I don't need a PA in my life right now. That the conversation is that's fine. Right now, you're getting on with your life and you're doing really well. We'll step back. But if you want to contact us, as Luke says, you can contact us. And what we're looking to do is have a system whereby they don't have to go through a duty system, but actually they can maybe go to the PA they had previously, somebody who they've got a relationship with, so they don't have to keep telling that story over and over and over. So I would say yes, retention is always an issue. Because sometimes being a PA or a family support worker can be a stepping stone to being a social worker. So we do try and make sure that we've got the right people, the right candidates. Sometimes you need a mixture of maturity, younger PAs. As Luke said, we've got people with different experiences. We've had people who've worked in probation, youth offending. It's just about getting that right mixture and making sure young people know that we are there for them and they're never closed. Of course, post-25, we can't continue to just keep working with young people. But I'd like to think that if a young person was 25 and 6 months or 26 and they needed something, they could ring us up and ask that question.
Excellent. Councillor Hartstein.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. If just page 67, just when you're talking about education, just so I understand this, obviously, I mean, looking at Thurrock being slightly below statistical neighbours. So 56.6, for example, the 19 to 21s are EAT. That, if my maths is right, does that make 43.4% a NEET? Yeah. So obviously it's a national issue, so it's not sort of looking at Thurrock specifically, but I mean that's really poor outcomes, aren't they, at the moment nationally for youngsters who are leaving care. Why are those outcomes so poor, do we think? What is the reason that so many youngsters are not are NEET? I'm actually genuinely curious why there's such a variance.
I mean, I think there's a lot of issues. I think, you know, one of the things that we have to be really clear about is these are youngsters who have had really, really difficult early life experiences and carry with them that trauma and you know, have struggles that, you know, children in or young adults in ordinary situations don't have to deal with. So, you know, first and foremost, you know, that needs to be addressed or mitigated or supported in order to kind of put them in a situation which is comparable to other young people. And that's why I was kind of talking about earlier, you know, some of the intensive work from our PAs might be just about kind of getting them into that work environment in the first place, to kind of help them to pick up the phone, to kind of help them to understand, well, what you know, what's it like when you go for an interview? Because you know, most of us, when we went for our initial interviews when we were young, were quite nervous. But if you add on those other layers about, you know, those fundamental things that are part of your identity, about fear of rejection or loss, or you know, that kind of stuff that arises out of those really adverse early life experiences, you can kind of see that it's, in some senses, it's a whole different ball game for care leavers. So I think that's a massive part of what those issues are.
Thank you. And just a couple sort of, just with 9.3, I think what Councillor Polly's picked up on as well, talking about the idea of working alongside colleagues from the Inspire Youth Hub. Is it the PA that does the piece of work in terms of matching and supporting the individual youngster? Or is it someone else? Just my own clarification.
So the PA has a lot of knowledge about the young person, what their experiences are, what their interests are, what their strengths are, what their areas of development are. The Inspire Youth Hub are the guys that kind of understand what are the opportunities that are out there, like where are the apprenticeships, where's the work experience, what are the particular schemes that are running at the moment which might provide those opportunities. So really it's about matching those two things. So the PA bringing the knowledge of the young person, and then the Inspire guys kind of saying, well, we think we have an opportunity here that might really meet that need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It actually follows on quite nicely from Councillor Hartstein's points, as it's also about education, employment and training. We discussed this at the last group parenting committee. I believe Councillor Manwar raised the point of what the council was going to do to improve education, employment and training. Since then, in my role as Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, I joined a meeting with officers to discuss the pilot programme that's mentioned in 9.5 of what we can do in this area. I found the initial meeting very positive, and it was quite optimistic for how we can go forward. This was just an initial meeting. We have another meeting coming up soon. I've invited Councillor Arnold as chair of this committee to join me in that meeting, and a paper has been drafted which the group of us will discuss before it is sent to the senior leadership team. This will outline the potential to offer more opportunities for our care leavers within the family business, which in this case is the council. And I'm sure Councillor Arnold will be able to give a much more in-depth review at the next corporate parenting committee.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, thank you very much for the invite as well. It's much appreciated. I know there's been discussions behind the scene, and I do appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Memoir.
I'd first like to say I'm happy to hear that. This is a different sort of question, but it's to do with the support network for care leavers, because as you've said, there is that transition from when they get to around about 18 and then 21, then eventually 25, when, you know, that relationship between the young person and the council sort of, for lack of a better word, dissipates or disappears. So in terms of a young person having a support network around them, as they transition into adulthood, where there's so much sort of going on, and for these young people, as has been like acknowledged, they've gone through some really difficult like situations, which most of us wouldn't really understand or wouldn't have that sort of experience. How does the council and like the foster team and the families and the council really as a whole facilitate like social sort of interactions between these young people? Because wouldn't it, I don't know, this is just an idea, but wouldn't it be nice if a lot of these young people that have been through like a similar experience are given like a platform by the council to kind of meet and sort of talk? Because at the end of the day, no one can be forced to like make friends, or like, and just because they've been through like the care system doesn't mean that they're gonna kind of get along or gel or whatever. But at the same time, I was just thinking it might be beneficial if the council does kind of facilitate that, because at the end of the day, we all kind of need a social circle around us, and these people, they may not necessarily have the traditional sort of family dynamic, but couldn't the council work to kind of create something similar for them? Just because being a young person like myself, like I know how kind of hard it is for me, and I'm coming from a family where I haven't had to experience what they've experienced. I've got my parents, I've got my siblings. For them, it might be slightly different. So would that be something that the council would be open to and your team would be able to do? Or if you already do it, maybe I'm kind of talking about, yeah.
So obviously the team and the service, Luke obviously is a service manager. We're trying to do quite a lot of work in terms of engagement and support with young people, sort of developing groups. So one of the things that we're in the process of looking at is developing a care leavers forum, a formal care leavers forum, where care leavers can get together, they can discuss their experiences and talk about what it's like for them, and then just trying to kind of develop those relationships, as you said, hopefully relationships and friendships that will last post-25 as well, and also to inform the work that we do going forward, because what they can do is tell us about what wasn't so good, what worked really well, how they've experienced the work with us, and hopefully will help us to constantly improve the service and how young people experience being involved with us. I don't know if you wanted to say anything more, Luke.
I guess just to mention that there are, I think I'd mentioned in my report, a kind of annual schedule of events. So there are things like barbecues. In October we have the celebration for Care Leavers Week, where care leavers will be invited to kind of spend time with members of staff, with the PAs, but also other care leavers, and to kind of do exactly that, really, kind of try and make those links and build those relationships, yes, with our team, but also with each other as well. So,
if I could just add one more thing, I think one of the things that you've highlighted that's really important is around networking for care leavers and the network of support. So we have something within Children's Social Care called the Family Network Meeting, and that's I think in practice has been largely focused on under 18s, and one of the things we're doing at the moment in the service is looking at how we can apply the family network model to children when they're 16, 17 and then on into aftercare. And we've been looking at some examples, and I think that's one of the things in the next few months we're going to be rolling that out. So there's a lot of informal relationships that are really good. Young people who have the same PA might know each other or live in Head Start housing together, know each other. And one of the things I have noticed when I've been to the events, and the barbecue is really worth it because the food is wonderful and prepared by the young people. But what we do at those events is invite young people who are 16, 17 to come along, and the welcome they get is really heartwarming to see, and they're drawn in, and we have such a diverse group of young people that they reach out to each other and find their niche, and it's really nice to see at those events.
Sorry, just one final thing, sort of leading on from what Luke and Dan is saying, is that for a lot of our care leavers, they do maintain relationships with their families, so we don't want to kind of take that away. And it's also acknowledging that when young people get to 16, 17, 18, they can make some decisions about who they remain involved with. So it's trying to help them and support them to have healthy relationships with their family, try and keep those family networks going, making sure they're having contact, you know, as they're kind of coming through their childhood, but acknowledging how they're feeling and what they want in the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I mean, that's a great point. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Right, okay. Anybody else got any more questions? Oh, Councillor Carter, sorry, I forgot.
No problem at all, Chair. Firstly, I just want to say I was fighting the urge to bang the table in support of what you were saying there. As Thurrock has come on so far in terms of the network between people in care. When I was in care, I knew my sister. I didn't know other people in care. But since I've seen this since becoming a councillor, there are now networks of award events. I forget the name of it. What was the award event we went to? You were there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have the Children in Care
Awards. That was it. And it was like there were groups there. There were people talking there who knew each other really well. So I'd like to say that has really come on far. But I would like to ask, with this care leaver forum, is that open to all care leavers of any age, or is it just people who are currently active to the service?
There's no reason why somebody couldn't be involved if they're not actively open. I mean, the aim is that for all of our young people, eventually what we'll be doing is we currently are able to say all those young people who would be eligible for a service up to the age of 25. And what we would like really is to keep in contact with them, write to young people, even if they're not engaged with us currently, and say, look, you know, we're still around, you can still contact us, we're still here. But actually some of those young people will have some really valuable lessons that they might want to support some of the younger care leavers with. So if you're a 25-year-old who's experienced staying put, you've been to university, or you've had a number of difficulties, and you come out the other end, you can probably really help other young people who are struggling and trying to manage. So I would envisage it being open to all of our care leavers.
Councillor Polly.
Again, sorry guys. If it's okay, can I ask the ladies here a question? I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not comfortable, but obviously this is grassroots. I think Councillor Carter is angling for an invite to the barbecue. I think that's what that last question was about.
If anyone does know of a barbecue going.
But I mean, we're here because we're corporate parents, because we want to support the children, but we've got to support the families and networks that are supporting them out in the community. I mean, because of Councillor Manuel's question, I've got this thing in my head about sort of care cousins now. It's very true. It takes a whole village to raise a child, doesn't it? There's never a one fit system for anybody, is there? We're all individuals. So, are you comfortable me asking you a question? And from your experiences over years, do you feel that the children that you've cared for have got that external network? So, because like with any families, there's going to be tensions, isn't there? You're going to get to a stage where they're going to be upset with you for a reason, you're going to be upset with them, and in a structured family, I'd have an auntie or a grandma that I can go and spend a couple of hours with and let the heat go out of it. I mean, do you guys feel that you're supported in that way?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of support. We have each other to support ourselves. So we, if we're having a bit of a time, we have our supervising social workers that we can ring and say, look, things are getting a bit tough. Or I can ring the social worker and say, like, they're getting quite rude, quite disrespectful. Would you mind just coming out, having a chat and just explaining, you know, the rules that, you know, this is not acceptable. But, and the social workers are there, the supervising social workers there. We do have respite, which you can use if things are just getting too much. Because as everyone says that, you know, these children, they haven't had the best start. and you can be plain sailing for years, and then just something will come up, probably when they get the most comfortable, because they know they can do it, and they know that there's that safe space. But it can upset everything for a while. So yeah, I think we've got good support around ourselves.
Support groups as well that we can attend.
So yeah,
lots of training.
Yeah, and they don't go away, even when they get to 18 or 25. You'll get suddenly. I used to have one that used to ring me every year at New Year's Eve at midnight. Every year, I'd not hear for 1 year to the next, but she used to just ring me at New Year's Eve. So yeah. Okay, that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think this has really been a great piece of contribution now. I mean, we've all been to sort of various sort of functions, social functions, and they're always real good hoot, aren't they? I mean, and you kind of have some really good discussions with people, and you really can actually get the nitty-gritty of all sorts of things, really, in a social kind of arena as well. I think it's great, and anything that comes along this way is a real massive benefit. So thank you very much. But I mean, just sort of closing off, I mean, I was reading the report earlier on because I crammed it today, having just come back from a holiday. Yeah, and it just brings me around to actually the last paragraph. It's 10.3 on 68. And I think we touched on it slightly earlier on. We're staying in touch with over 95% of the care leavers. And really, it's, the last paragraph, it's really to be commended. I think it completely underlines, the level of commitment from the aftercare service. Well, thank you very much. So thank you. So with that, I think we've got a couple of recommendations, if I can find them quickly. And they're on page 59. It's 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Everybody in agreement? Yep. Yeah. Thank you very much. Right, if we can now move on to, and it is item 8, and it's the report on transitions to adult services for care leavers and children in care. Now, I will say, I think Dan is going to present this for us tonight, but I will say, and I'd like to put it on record, there's been much discussion really ever since I've been on this committee. It's about a year and a half now, and obviously chaired a few of those. There's always been a lot of discussion about officers actually being in the room, so they can actually receive the questions and whatever. And I do find it quite disappointing that even now, and even after emails and things that were going around from the last meeting, that we still have officers that are not joining us in the room. So I'd like to put that on record, and I'll hand you over to Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for those comments. Yes, unfortunately, we've had apologies from BOSA, and there was no one else available in adult services to comment. So Luke and I will do our best to answer any questions, but it may be that we have to come back with some written responses later. So for young people who are looked after, they might have a range of needs, and I think it's really important to recognise the diversity of need we have in our population of looked after children. Some don't have a great deal of need and some have a much higher level of need. What we want to ensure as they transition into adulthood is, do they require any further services from adult services? They have their aftercare support, which is our statutory service we deliver, but they may be entitled to other things, and aftercare isn't a replacement for other services the council provides. It's in addition to. So what we do is work very closely with adult services and the transitions team there. The transitions team in adult services has a very wide brief. It looks at all children who might be eligible for children's social care, so perhaps those on a child in need plan, perhaps those subject to child protection, or those with disabilities would fall within their remit, but also they have responsibilities towards our looked after young people. As part of the transitions programme, we ensure regular referrals are made for children when they become 16, and it might just be a brief assessment from adults depending on the level of need of the young person, or it might be something more in depth if their needs are higher, to establish what services they may need to receive as an adult and whether they're going to be open to adult social care. The team establishment is set out at 2.2 and kind of gives you a view of a relatively small team with quite a lot to do, I think it's fair to say. And they're managing some vacancies currently. There's a caseload of 202 young people open to that team. We have made a range of referrals, and I think that's documented a little bit later in the report, which sets out 33 young people at 3.6 have received assessments from the Preparing for Adulthood team, and there are 19 young people who were previously looked after who are receiving services. And the range of services can be quite diverse. So it may be that they're receiving direct payments towards care in the community. It may be that they were receiving a residential placement of some description, so they may be in supported living, and that may be a result of needs arising out of their disability or mental health. Some of them are in shared lives placements, which, as a sort of hand note, is a bit like fostering for adults, but not quite the same, but allows a young person to continue living in a family funded by contributions from the council and their own benefits. And others might be in supported living arrangements, so have a good deal of independence, but have that support on hand for where they need it. Adult Services provides a good deal of support to vulnerable care experienced young people and work very closely with the aftercare team when there are difficulties. I think that's probably as far as I can go, so if there's any questions, we'll do our best.
Thank you very much, Dan. I just would like to just jump in there really just quickly. Hopefully you might be able to answer, but if not, we can get the answer afterwards. I mean, it says on page 72, it's quite early on in the report, 2.3, and obviously there's some vacancies at the minute. I mean, how is that progressing at the minute, being such a small team?
So the last time I spoke to the team manager in that team, they were hoping to reach their establishment by Christmas this year. I think it has been tricky over recent months, but their adverts are on their way out, and they're hoping to recruit in that time frame.
I mean, is it too much to ask them? Is it difficult to recruit people in this field, and why do they leave? Is that a fairly straightforward question?
I think that's a difficult one for us to answer, really. This is adult services, it's not children's social care. I mean, retention and recruitment, my understanding of recruitment and retention in adults, it's easier than it is in children, but I wouldn't like to comment on this area. I think they need to be answering that question.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Carter nudged it, I think.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for presenting the report. I was just reading through it, and I was really happy to see about the gradual introduction of the aftercare worker to the young person before they actually have them as their worker. I think this is a really good system. How long has this been going, and have you seen any improvements as a result of this? I'm happy with a written answer, I know.
I mean, I think it's been going quite well. It might be better that Luke talks about the introduction of the PA, and then I can talk about the introduction from the transitions team, if that's helpful.
So the PA's introduced at 16, so they're effectively working alongside the young person for 2 years before they become the allocated worker, person with overall responsibility for the case. So I think it's a massive help for a young person to kind of have a friendly face, have an established relationship, have a level of trust with that worker before again at that really significant time in their life when they're kind of moving into adulthood. So I think that what we've seen, and we do have most of our PAs in the aftercare service have been there for quite some time and are well established. So it is really helpful. What we're looking to is really maximise that and really, we've talked about the fact that there is going to be more resource in that team, new workers coming in, reduced caseload. So we're really looking at a really good opportunity now to sort of maximise that and kind of get as much kind of engagement in that early part as possible. So we really recognise the importance of that, I think.
I think in terms of the transitions to adult services, we have to be mindful about the number of professionals in a young person's life. So at the referral stage, it might be that there isn't a direct meeting. It will kind of be a screening referral to adults where they might make a brief assessment to say, do you know what, this young person's never going to need services in our view based on the information we have. You can come back later. So we wouldn't necessarily introduce a worker at that point because it's another young person in that young person's life, if that makes sense. However, if it does look like adult services will become involved based on the initial assessments, then they would start to come to key meetings, looked after children's reviews, education and healthcare plans if they're applicable, those kinds of things, start to introduce themselves as worker. Those visits are usually done jointly with the allocated social worker or the PA, depending on where we are in the process. So that relationship can build up. And then the adult social worker would start to build their own relationship and visit independently from there to complete their assessment.
Councillor Hardy.
Thank you. This might be one you can't answer, I'm afraid, but page 72, 2.4, just looking at the caseload, so it says the current caseload of the team is 202, and then on page 73, 3.6, it says 19 young people are receiving services. My question is, how many of the 202 are care leavers, children in care and care leavers? Is that the 19 referred to down there, or...?
So in terms of open allocated, yes, it's the 19 referred down there. We have some who, a group of young people who are in assessment, and that changes from time to time. I think the role of the Preparing for Adulthood team is wider than just children who are looked after Thurrock Council. It might be, so the other part of my portfolio is children with disabilities, and a lot of those children will continue to have needs as adults, and so they will be doing assessments and supporting those young people as young adults as well. Yep. So I think the fact that the number is small isn't necessarily the wrong thing. I think the important thing for us as corporate parents is to make sure we've looked into their future needs as adults, and do we as a local authority have a duty to provide services to them. We'd like to be clear of that by the age of 17 and be clear what those services are, so that we can talk to them and say, when you're 18, this is the professional network that support you, these are the services you're entitled to and receive. And I think there's development there to really to get to that point.
Yeah, lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No? Well, thank you very much for Dan, Luke and Janet for jumping in now. Yeah. And just before I sort of wrap up, I would like to say, again, just underline that we have gone through many meetings with people on the screen, and it makes life very difficult to communicate and get questions across. So again, just that message again, please, for officers to actually be present on the evening. These things are in the diary for long enough, and I think that people need to work on that. So if I can go straight to recommendations, please, on page 71, and that is 1.1 and 1.1. So all in agreement? Yep, thank you. Thank you. Next item is the staying put agenda, and I think that is down again, is it? And I will say, actually, before we kick off, I did actually quite enjoy reading this report, actually, because there's a lot in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I hope everyone enjoyed it. So I think staying put is one of the things that is a real offer to people who are turning 18, and it's something that is a national policy, but what this document does is explain how it's applied locally. What we're trying to do is replicate or to reflect family life for young people who are fostered, so that they're not sitting there in their foster family where they may have been for years and feeling like there's a deadline weighing on them to move out because they happen to be turning 18. So the staying put policy sets out what should happen next. It can be complicated because looked after status ends at 18. That's exactly what the law says. You are no longer looked after when you turn 18. And the fostering regulations effectively stop at the same time. And for foster carers and for young people, they need some framework to understand how the arrangements are going to continue, and that's what the staying put policy sets out. We have had a policy in Thurrock for some time, and this new policy, as you may have noticed for those of you who really enjoyed reading it, is very detailed and kind of sets out clear roles for each person in the network. What we would like to achieve is for foster families and for young people to be really clear about this really, really early on, and know what their options are, know what the expectations are, and know what support services they will get from the local authority. And over time in Thurrock, we've had some good staying put arrangements that have worked well, but we just felt the policy just needed to be updated to reflect that, really, and to kind of reflect the distinct roles. On 3.1, you can see the age distribution of young people. And you can see that staying put is largely used by those aged 18, 19 and 20. And I think that reflects probably most young people's journeys. That when you turn 18, you might be an adult in law, but you're probably getting up and going to school or college the next day is the reality for many of us and for many of our young people. So what we hope that this allows is something that's a bit more seamless and they can transition. I think some key bits of the policy I wanted to highlight is when young people are in education, they do turn 18, we've set the policy up so in fact nothing should change. The payments to the foster carers are the same, the expectations on what the foster carer should provide that young person are the same at that point to enable them to get to the end of that academic year. Once they're at the end of that academic year, things shift a little bit and the young people might be entitled to different benefits, or they may have different ideas about what they want to do next. They may be working, they may be heading to university. And what we've tried to address here is different routes to cover that. I think one of the point earlier that was made by Councillor Manware was around the network for young people, and what Staying Put should do is support everybody to stay as part of the network, so that you can go to university and still come home to your foster placement. You can join the military and still have somewhere to come back to. And that's the sort of principles behind it, and that's what we hope the policy delivers. And we think some of the evidence we have out there shows that these arrangements are working and supporting young people as they move to independence.
Thank you very much, Dan. If I can just raise the first thing first, page 127, and it's the recording of information. How long are these staying put records kept on file? Can the young person sort of ask for them to be destroyed at a point in the future? I'm just wondering how this information is stored and used and kept. And
so the information isn't any different to any other information that we keep around our young people. So we have statutory obligations for the amount of time we have to keep records relating to being in care and aftercare services, and the staying put information would stay in there. If they particularly wanted it destroyed, I think we'd have to have a conversation with them about what that would mean, that if something's gone, it's not recoverable, and check what our statutory obligations would be.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got any questions? Short and sweet. Thank you very much. Like I say, I did actually. There's lots of, without sort of sifting back through all the pages, there's lots of little nuggets and little things in there. Actually, sort of quite amusing in a way, really, because it's just real life and real people growing up and adjusting and everything else. It's really quite good, I found. Right, okay. So, page 99, recommendations 1.1, 1.2. Everybody okay? Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Too much paper. Oh, and that brings us round to item 10. That's why I couldn't find it. It's the verbal update, Children in Care Council.
So we've had apologies from Children in Care Council, and we don't have a written update from them. But I'd like to introduce two of our colleagues here tonight. So we've got Carly and Ruth Murdoch. And Carly will be taking over the Children in Care Council. She's one of our... Do you want to tell everybody who you are, Carly, and what you do?
It's all new to me. Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Banks, Participation and Engagement Officer. I'll be taking over Children in Care Council from the October meeting. So we're doing a handover meeting this month. This is obviously I was coming here to see how you guys roll and see what happens, and then I'll be attending hopefully next time with a young person or two.
So Carly currently has a role as Participation and Engagement Officer. She's working with a number of our young people, so some of our care leavers, some of our children in care, children who are child in need, and so she's got some of those relationships already, and she's currently sometimes attending the Children in Care Council, so she's really keen to get that up and running. So hopefully when we come back to the next corporate parenting committee, hopefully Carly and Ruth will be able to come along and tell us about some of the plans with some of the young people about what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that's great, thanks. I mean, they were really good little items, actually. They're good to sort of engage with people, and you actually do get to learn tiny little bits along the way as well. And Hi Ruth, I hadn't spoken to you for quite a long while. I think you're one of the first people I met actually, you know. And you're very helpful, very kind to me, so thank you very much. So, yeah, look forward to that coming back actually. That's a good item for us, so thank you very much. Right, so I think we're now going to then move to the work programme, and I think really we're just going to come back to IHAs, aren't we? I think we're going to need maybe a fuller and better sort of understanding of where we are and what progress we're making in that. If we can, we try and get that included in the next one. I think it's January, I believe, isn't it?
End of January.
Yeah, so if we can, I don't know if we can squeeze in an item on that, that'd be very beneficial, I think.
And obviously we've spoken about missing children and bringing something back, so we will bring something back to the next. If we get that formally recorded, then we'll make sure it's back.
That's great, I forgot about that. Thank you.
So just a couple of things. At the last corporate parenting committee, I did mention briefly that we were looking at having a social work practice week, which is at the end of September. Okay, so we've got social work practice week at the end of September. So it's week commencing the 25th. From Monday the 25th to Thursday the 28th. There's a really full programme. There's lots of really interesting things to see. Going out with social workers, attending some meetings, meeting young people, meeting parents. We've got a market event on the Thursday. I mean, Ruth is leading on this, so she can probably tell you a little bit more. It is open to members, senior managers, employees within the council. It's not a public-facing event, so we're not inviting the public in to do this, because obviously it's about young people, their families and their lives. And it's really important that people kind of try and book on. So we have shared the information, I think, with the lead member for children, but also the shadow lead member for children as well, so it can be shared with the Labour group. We really want as many people as possible to be engaged. I don't know if people have seen the programme, but so the plan is to get it out to Dem Services by the end of the week, so it can be shared with you all. Have a look at it. Ruth, I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add to that.
Well, it's kind of... It's quite varied, and we've also tried to offer opportunities outside of the working day, because we know some people would have difficulties in attending, so there are some things sort of late up twilight sessions or evening sessions as well, which might be of interest. So we really do urge you to try and book on. Some are virtual, but there's quite a lot of face-to-face opportunities as well. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I'll do my best to get there as well. I'm moving house this month. I don't know what day it is, and it's uproar at the minute, so I shall get along there if I can. Okay, if that's all there is. Oh, Janet again.
Sorry, one final. Sorry, did you want to say something?
If you don't mind me, Chair, I've been privileged enough to participate in this previously, and I would urge any member, not just corporate parents, but the wider audience, to engage, because it really opens your eyes to what an amazing job that our staff do, and some of their challenges that I thought I was quite knowledgeable because of my professional career and some of my personal background, but obviously things have moved on, and today's challenges are immense on all levels, and I've got to say I couldn't be more proud of the team, having interacted with them, and for them there's something called a duty of candour, and there was nothing off limits. You could ask people, you could be direct with people, and the passion and the care for our looked after children was obvious to me. So I would absolutely urge anybody that's got the opportunity to participate in this practice week. I think it's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Polly, and I would echo that really. It's your opportunity, everyone around the table, it's your opportunity to bring to life some of the work we do and the things we discuss in this committee as well. So the final thing I just wanted to raise is that Children's Social Care is looking to organise what's known as a Christmas dinner for our care leavers. It's being led by one of our social workers, along with the aftercare service, and it's kind of comes out of something that was developed by I don't know if people know about the poet Lem Sisse, who was a former care leaver himself, and it's about making sure that no young person is alone on Christmas Day. A lot of our care leavers will have somewhere to go. You know, they'll be with their foster family, or they'll be with their birth family, or friends or family. But for a small number of young people, there really is no one for them to spend Christmas with. And this is an opportunity to make sure that they're able to have a really good Christmas. We've sent something out amongst our staff, and we've got our first meeting, I think, next week. But we also are looking for volunteers. We know people are busy, we know people have got commitments, but we are going to need people on the day. We've sourced, Mary, who's one of our social workers, has sourced a venue, and a chef who's willing to do it for free, a DJ, got some funding in. So a lot of work has gone on. One of our practitioners has put a lot of work into this, but we're developing a working group to make sure it's successful. But it is going to need people to help. So we will be sending something out to members as well as staff. We've sent something out to staff already, but we'll be sending out and asking people if they can give any time at all. That would be really welcome.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. We'll watch for that. Okay, I'd like to just close the meeting now. Councillor Mambar. Thank you.
It's a quick one. I don't know is it actually on Christmas Day? This event that you're talking about, it's on the 25th of December.
It is on 25th of December, that day when most people are sitting at home in the warm with their families. It's making sure that...
I'd definitely be up for it. I just wanted some clarity, like, is it on the 25th? But yeah, that's something I'd be up for it, so yeah.
Excellent.
It will be my first Christmas off in 5 years. But I'm sure I can play a part.
Can I just say that there will be an invitation going from Kenna for the children's Christmas party as well for the one team on the 10th of December. So please look out for the invite, and if you can, the councillors can attend, then that would be lovely to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly we're going to have a busy festive period, aren't we? Okay, I'd like to close the meeting, and thanks for everybody for bearing with me. Tough as it is sometimes. The time is now just turned 9:15. So thank you very everyone for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.